Hello, this is John Feigenbaum. I am the president and CEO of Whitman Publishing and also the publisher of the Red Book 2026. And we're here today for the fifth edition of our Red Book podcast with editor Jeff Garrett. And we have a really special guest today. This is our second special guest. And today we have a two-time United States Mint director under four presidents, David Ryder. David, thank you so much for joining us. That's like going straight to the top of who we could ever get on the show. So we might be ruining future episodes by having you, but it's an honor to have you here. I'll do a quick run through of a few things that are on your resume, just to give some background. So Director Ryder was, as I said, Mint director twice under George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. So four different presidents he served under. And he's been responsible for bringing to market some incredible coins that everybody knows incredibly well. Like in 2021, we had the full redesign of the Silver Eagle, which is the world's most popular bullion coin. The Bucking Bronco gold coin, which is my personal favorite modern issue, I think maybe from 1950 forward. This incredible coin was coin of the year and graced the cover of last year's Red Book. Really cool coin. And I think, David, you told me you were involved in 38 or so different coin programs. And the other one people will recognize is the 2021 Morgan and Peace commemorative reissues.
Thanks, John. I feel like I'm sitting with two icons of the numismatic industry with Jeff and John. I gladly approve to do this because I think I'll learn a thing or two.
We appreciate you being willing to talk, because it's, what the U.S. Mint does. I mean, people just think about mint sets and proof sets, but especially in the last 20 or 30 years, it really has a big impact on how it affects the hobby in general. So what you did as a Mint director obviously had like just some Morgan and Peace dollars.
Very specific legislation that the U.S. Mint specifically wrote. Thanks to Tom Urim, who's now the head of the American Numismatic Association, is an old friend, helped write that legislation. And we got it passed by President Trump. And it was quite a unique piece of legislation that allows the U.S. Mint to not only mint the 100th year anniversary of the Morgans, but it allows the Mint to manufacture Morgans going on in the foreseeable future in different reverse proofs, enhanced proofs, all those different types. But it has the ability to go on for quite a long time. And it's strictly because of the way the legislation was written. So that program's going to live on.
Yeah, that's great. That brings up an interesting subject. I've always wondered, and ask you, a person like you that we're so close to it. It seems like the public really loves the redesigns. Like when you guys come out with like the 16 quarter redesign or the high relief redesign in 2009 and the Morgan and Peace. What is your feeling on like the creation of new designs like you did with the Bucking Bronco that was so successful versus reissuing, coins that were designed 125 years ago? I wonder how that tug and pull of like new art versus redoing old art.
Jeff, that's a great question. I personally really like the idea of having new artists involved. As an example, when we redesigned the American Gold Eagle and the Silver Eagles, one of the first calls I made, believe it or not, was to an old friend by the name of John Mercanti. And anybody who's a coin collector knows who I'm talking about. The reason I called John was I asked him for his permission to change his iconic design to a new design. And John was very gracious. He was sad to see it go, but he knew that there were new artists to come along and help with the redesign. Not just on the silver dollar, but all the other things I think I was involved with included new artists. And those artists were chosen under a program that I think some of the collectors, numismatists out there who are listening know about, but it's called the Artist Infusion Program, where we actually interviewed several hundred, I think it was 400 different artists throughout the country to participate in this new program called the Artist Infusion Program, which allows new artists, medallic artists, to participate in the redesign of some of these programs that you saw when I was there the last time. I think it's very important for new art to come about. The old art that all of us know has been around for ages and has been around for ages because it's so iconic. And I think it's great to allow new artists the ability to show their wares and do different things, give people like us the ability to make a choice from a lot of different variations and a lot of different ideas and opinions of what someone might think an eagle looks like or a coin design looks like. I think it's very important.
Yeah, maybe someday we'll have a Banksy coin, so that would be exciting.
Yeah, you never know.
Let me add one. Well, let me introduce one other item. This is new to me, and it's old hat, of course, to you and Dave. You were just alluded to the fact that when the United States Mint comes out with a new silver coin, it needs to be legislated by Congress. Correct, Dave?
If correct. In some cases, no, but in most cases, if it's a coin that is a product that carries the United States of America, it has a denomination. Those normally have to go through legislative process. Not all of them,
Right.
most of them.
Right. But the nuance here is that gold coins do not. Why that makes any sense, no one will ever know. At least I won't. But you can issue a new $5 gold coin or a $50 gold coin without legislation, but you can't do it with the silver, which is why we had the 2024 flowing hair denominated gold coins, but we had metals. They can get it. They also get around it at the mint by striking a metal, has no denomination, which technically shouldn't matter, right? No one's going to take a $1 silver coin and turn it into the bank, but it matters to collectors. It matters a lot if you can call it a coin. That means it has a denomination to a sovereign nation, in this case, the United States. So this is a big issue. Everyone asks us, why don't they just make a $1 2024 flowing hair dollar? That's the reason. They would have had to go through Congress, and we know how difficult sometimes that is going to be. So I just want to add that piece to it because I found that to be interesting.
Let me just correct you on one thing.
Please.
The reason why the U.S. Mint is allowed to make certain gold coins is not because it's not mandated by legislation. The ability to manufacture gold coins for the United States Mint is the fact of the purity of the metal that is used. So the flowing hair Liberty, for example, was not legislated. It was made out of pure gold, while the American Gold Eagle is made out of 49 gold. So it has the ability to do that. So when we wanted to change the design, for example, on the Liberty coin that with the Bucking Bronco, we were able to do that because that program was not quote unquote legislated with a piece of legislation to allow it to go forward.
I see. So are we saying 5 nines versus 4 nines? I mean, what are we saying?
Yeah.
How many nines?
Pretty much, yes.
Wow. Okay. So why can't they do that with silver? Why can't they take 80% silver and put a denomination if it's the purity of metal?
Probably because no one's asked the question before.
Oh,
Sure,
okay.
sure. It's probably not a bad question to ask. The American Silver Eagle is such an iconic coin that they make millions and millions of over since 1986, I think it was, when they started the program under Ronald Reagan. It's never really changed, with the exception in the legislation, there was a clause in the legislation that allowed me to do this, and I learned about it coincidentally in a staff meeting, where after a certain period of time in the legislation, there was a clause that said after the U.S. Eagle had been in circulation for X amount of years, we could have gone and changed the design based on what the legislation said with the approval of the Secretary of the Treasury, which is what I did. And that's how the design for both the gold and the silver eagle came about.
That's interesting. John, I was going to mention that it does have a difference for selling some coins if it has a denomination, because most states have sales tax exemptions, but it's only for legal tender. So legal tender, metals versus legal tender does have impact in, 40 some odd states on sales tax.
Interesting. Okay. This is good information because I knew part of the story, but not all of the story. And I think knowing all the story allows us maybe, like we said, what if we just change the purity of the silver? Is that good enough? We'll have to read the fine print on that. That would be interesting.
John, there's a lot of things that the lawyers, government lawyers, mint lawyers say you can and you can't do.
Uh-huh.
One of my jobs as the mint director was to push them pretty hard to try to get some changes so that we could introduce different changes and privy marks and so on and so forth. Changing the specific design, though, on those coins is very difficult. And because it only comes up once in or 40 years, I think it is, something like that. I can't remember the exact number of years. It gave us that ability, and I took advantage of it.
Yeah. I think it's beautiful. I think the result is beautiful and well received.
It's good.
Guys, there are some coin collectors, because we did a lot of studies on that, but there are some coin collectors that would prefer to keep with the old iconic designs and never change. I just was one of those that felt that I thought for the things that we've already discussed, new designs, new artists, and so on and so forth, that it was important to do something different.
I mean, look at the millions of people who started collecting coins when the state quarter program came out. And then speaking on that for like change, obviously a big topic in the news has been the elimination of the cent. And a lot of people don't realize it, but in 1856, when they stopped making large cents, that was the creation of modern coin collecting, kind of as we know it. There really were no coin collectors hardly in the United States before that. And the penny being changed from a large cent to a small cent created, at the time, probably thousands of collectors, which was, kind of the start. But the elimination of the cents made like national news. Are you surprised that it's made such big news? What's your thoughts on that?
To be honest, I'm not surprised at all. When I was being confirmed for the second time, I was sitting before Congress and billions of pennies that are out in circulation in our country. And the logistical requirements of eliminating a denomination gets into a vast number of things that if that's the direction that Congress wants to go, because that would be something Congress would have to approve, that's going to take an awful lot of work by the Federal Reserve and by the U.S. Treasury, because it's the Federal Reserve who is the customer of the United States Mint and who's the one who creates the orders for creating pennies. So all these new pennies are because of orders from the Federal Reserve Bank to go out and distribute the pennies around the country. On the other hand, if as to what my understanding of what President Trump has suggested was to stop the production. That's similar to what the Canadians did back in 2012, I think it was. The Canadians simply stopped production. They didn't take it out of circulation. It still circulates to this very day. And as those old pennies come back through circulation, they get eliminated. So there's using that method, I think there's probably some room to have some serious negotiation with the Federal Reserve and all the banks that are involved in the circulation of our currency around the country, and not take it totally out of circulation.
That was one thing I was going to ask you is you have a lot of friends. Obviously, you probably know every mint director in the world. And they're, for the last 20 years. And when like Canada and I guess other states, they've gotten rid of these lower denominations as far as production of them. What has their experience been? Have it been a generally positive experience or what are their thoughts on it?
Well, when John asked me to come on this podcast this morning, I said to myself, I'll bet you they're going to ask about the penny. And so I called Marie LeMay, who was
I didn't. Jeff did.
I text Marie LeMay, who is the mint director for the Royal Canadian Mint. A very good friend of mine, a program that we did some things together, the Pride of Two Nations coins that we did together with our Silver Eagle coin. And I asked that question to Marie, and they're tickled that they got rid of it. The penny right now, and they did it the right way. The U.S. penny right now costs somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.70 cents a penny. The nickel is up to 13 or almost 14 cents. There has to be some discussion because that's the amount of losses that the government is taking on those two denominations can open the door, I think, to a number of different discussions, whether it's eliminating the dollar bill and trying to, instead of co-circulating our $1 coin, The $1 coin lasts 30 years. The dollar bill lasts maybe 4.5 years, maybe give or take. And then the cost involved. The same with the $5 bill. There could be consideration for new denominations because the circulating coinage lasts considerably longer. So I think President Trump has correctly, in some circles, brought up an issue that really I think merits some serious discussion. It should involve other mint directors. It should involve the numismatic community. It should involve the manufacturers of paper currency and circulating coins, because everybody's going to have a say in it. It's not going to be, there's no simple answer to it, but there are, in my opinion, and maybe I'll be asked one day by the Treasury Department, there are a number of things that can be considered that should be taken seriously.
Well, it's, discussed for 20, 30 years. Like you say, this is not new. Like 1974, they made aluminum pennies, because of the cost of copper. So it's been going on for a long time. But it seems like now there is kind of like a less adverse to the risk of like making a big change. And speaking of that, if they were to stop producing cents, what are your thoughts on the idea of continuing to make sense for maybe mint sets and proof sets, but to make sense, but for collectors from a manufacturing standpoint? Is that a practical thing that could be continued? Or, I would love to see them be able to still make, John's got some props there for like Lincoln penny folders.
To do something, if they stop the manufacturing of circulating pennies, not pull them out of circulation, you could do something every year with a penny under a limited number of production, specifically with a special design on it or something, that coin collectors like we did with the quarter program, is you dump quarters in the circulating bags and they get circulated around the country, and coin collectors could go out and try to find that special penny and so on and so forth. I think there's a number of things for the coin collector that someone could do that could be very creative. And again, building the community of coin collectors. That's what this country needs.
I mean, a gold penny. Could we get a gold penny in there? It's never been done.
Yeah.
How cool that would be.
I
don't know.
Pure gold, John.
Yeah, pure gold.
If it goes in, is it or you think it was like with organizations like the ANA or who would, because some of these things, it's almost like it need to be pushed. Like there's lobbyists going to be trying to push to keep the penny. But if people want to have ideas, I mean, the collectors need to unite to say, hey, let's make pennies, but make them for collectors and things like that. I guess it's just a grassroots thing.
No, it's fairly simple. First of all, you have to have a creative group at the United States Mint to come up with these kind of ideas. To me, it's just not one and done. It's okay. We have this. I view it as an opportunity to create some change. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with having these discussions and run through the financials and run through all the different things that all the various groups need to accomplish and work together. The Federal Reserve is a big player in all this stuff because, as I said, they're the ones that make the orders for the penny, for all the circulating coins. The circulating coins and the way the mint is funded, the mint is not funded by congressional legislation. The mint is funded on what's called a revolving fund that operates on what's called seigniorage. And many global mints around the world know what seigniorage is, but it's the difference between the cost of manufacturing and what, say, the Federal Reserve is willing to pay for that penny or that nickel or the dime or the quarter and so on and so forth. And that's how the U.S. Mint funds itself. And now the Mint's funding is down a bit because of COVID and the overproduction of a lot of circulating coins. But that'll turn as time goes on. But it's an interesting discussion that the Fed has to be a part of. I think if you take a look at the retail stores, the Walmarts and the Targets and those large big box stores, getting rid of the penny will cause a number of issues such as rounding. Potentially, there's a number of issues, but there's new technology out there that these facilities can, create a coinage credit card or a debit card or something. There's a lot of things that someone could do if you think about it creatively as a business.
But and it goes without saying that we're within the hobby, within, let's say, the mint as well. We're under the pressure of the fact that the world is moving to digital payments. So this is the unspoken aspect. The trend has been very rapid towards digital payments, I think, in the last 3 or 4 years. I was in Stockholm recently. You can't use cash if you try in Stockholm. But I also wonder if there isn't going to be a backlash about that as well. Digital payments means digital tracking, and is there going to be some kind of pushback? David, I had one quick question as you were speaking, and this is just all this is just I'm learning with everything you're saying. Does the Federal Reserve pay face value for what they buy? So if it's a 5 cent coin, are they paying 5 cents? And the mint makes the difference between the cost, in that case, negative.
The Federal Reserve pays face value, but the seigniorage is the difference between the cost of the
Right.
product versus the manufacturing. So the mint would eat the manufacturing cost, if you will, and that's how they generate their revenue on credit cards and things like that, and so on and so forth. I'm a believer that cash is going to be around for a long time, and I believe a lot of the other central banks believe that also. But there are ways, I think, to take advantage. For example, if there's no longer a penny, would you rather force the folks that shop at some of these stores who can least afford it? In my opinion, it's almost like a forced tax if you just stick it down their throat without coming up with a creative solution. Walmart and Target and those kind of stores that cater to a certain clientele, what are they going to do? Do they eat the cost of the rounding? Because the rounding, in my opinion, it's only going to go up. No one's going to round down.
Why not? But
Having a
why not round?
you certainly can. I know the Federal Reserve has been very supportive of something like that, but I think there needs to be careful consideration with some of these large big box stores that rounding is a real issue, and it costs their consumers a considerable amount of money given the size of our economy. Of course, rounding on people who can least afford it.
Okay, but am I wrong in the world of averages to say that, let's say the rounding were at the 5 cent level. If something ends in O1 or O2, it rounds down. If it's, and you could use the third one, the 3 cent, to go up or down based on how the global economy weighs this properly. So if your bill comes to $1.94, you pay. If your bill is $1.91, you pay. And then the question is, shouldn't that wash for everybody? And do people, I understand. I'm not trying to be insensitive to people who can afford a few pennies here and a few pennies there, but are we really talking about a meaningful thing? I see pennies all over the floor now. Nobody's picking up pennies in the street. This is not, it's worth a lot more to pick up a plastic bottle that you can have recycled possibly, but not a penny or
Yeah,
2 pennies.
I think the reality is people get pennies. When they go shop, they get pennies, put them in their pocket, and they go home and they put them in a jar. So I don't think people, I mean, maybe, like I said, I don't want to be insensitive either, but how many people actually put pennies in their pocket to go shopping? They really, it's just I think it's going to put all this stuff is going to be a stark reality of what really happens to, you receive, I know thousands and thousands of pennies go to a big jar. We just kind of stick them in, you receive them, but I'm not sure how many people actually shop with them. So I think it's a good conversation because it's 20, 30 years from now, will there be coins? Maybe it's going to be 5 years. The whole world's speeding up, and it's just a really fascinating conversation about, who it impacts and, the politics involved in it and all that stuff. It's somewhere more moving parts than we all realize, especially when I thought I understood it. Then I started hearing you talk, Dave, and I'm like, wow, it's way more complicated than I realized.
It doesn't, Jeff, it doesn't have to be complicated. Unfortunately, certain parts of it is complicated because of how many different people there are involved, both from the production point, the manufacturing point, how many people would lose their jobs if you got rid of the penny. There's so many different issues. But I guess my point is there are a lot of smart people. There are a lot of people in this industry. There are a lot of smart people who have thought a little bit about this. And before we do anything rash, is get together as a group and discuss the best way to move forward on this. And it's I would enjoy that. I would enjoy having that conversation because it's in my mind, a fairly easy thing to do. But there are a lot of things, if you do it wrong, could cause a lot of problems. And So we have the opportunity, I think, based on the current discussion, to do something and do it right. Get it right.
Well, we'll count on John to represent the coin album lobby, so he'll work on.
I'm going to represent the $2 and $5 coin lobby.
Uh,
That's really, listen, it only makes sense if seniorage is the motivator. Why trade me a penny for a $2 coin and trade me a nickel for a $5 coin? Arm wrestle match with the guys over at the Bureau of Printing and Engraving and get them to stop making ones and fives. They can keep making their $2 bill. Everybody likes a $2 bill. And all right, it's a great, thank you for that insight. Let's switch over to another subject, which hopefully you have some really good history for, and what we're really excited about at Whitman, although we don't have firm details, is the 2026 semi-quincentennial. I had to practice that. The semi-quincentennial is the 250-year anniversary of the United States Mint. We all know how popular the bicentennial quarters were, for example, and bicentennial half dollars. So what's coming up in 26 that you know about?
I don't know a lot of some of the other things that are going on with the Mint as far as what they're going to be introducing or who they're going to be partnering with. I know there are a lot of global mints that would love to partner with the United States Mint because there's just so much history between the Spanish Mint and the French Mint and the British Mint and so on and so forth with regard to our 250th year history that could be celebrated, similar to what we did with the Pride of Two Nations product. That said, before I left the Mint Director's job, the quarters program, Jeff, that you mentioned earlier, that was started by Mint Director Phil Deal, it was a great program. It's made hundreds of millions of dollars in seniorage for the U.S. government. It's been a very popular program. When I came back, one of the quarters program was reaching its end. And I asked everybody at the Mint what were the plans, and there were no plans at that time to do anything different. So we immediately started looking at doing something different. One of the things, Jeff, you might agree with this, that with the quarters program that came and went were very long programs. They were 12-year programs. And by the time a young coin collector, gets done collecting all 12 years of coins, they're through high school, they're into college, they're into doing things that kids do in college. And my guess is they're not into coin collecting at that point until several years later. So I said to the group, why don't we create 3 different programs instead of just one program, and we had to get legislation. We had to get approval for that. And so that's what happened. That's why you now have a 4-year program that honors famous American women. In 2026, that program will be over. And then through the legislation is mandated that all the circulating coins in the United States of America are to change. I don't know the Mint's exact thought process on this, but for me, the intention is to change the redesign of the obverse and the reverse of all circulating coins for 1 year only in celebration of the 250th year anniversary of our country. My thought process on that was to try to get young collectors to collect all those coins. And I know the Mint's going to do some of that. I just don't know to the extent, will it be all the circulating coins or just the obverse or maybe the obverse and reverse? But the legislation allows the Mint to do both. And I saw that as a way to really kick in collecting of numismatic products around this country. And then followed in 2026, starting in 2027, it's going to be a 4-year, maybe 5-year focus on youth sports. So sporting events for youth, again, centered around youth, culminating in 2028 in the celebration of the U.S. Olympics in Los Angeles, and whereby the legislation stipulates that the U.S. Mint will have the ability to manufacture and design the medals for the Olympic athletes. And then if you tie that in from a marketing point of view, think about all the things you can do from a marketing point of view of creating collector coin sets for collectors, all based on the Olympics, based on youth sports. And it was all done through a lot of due diligence and focus study groups on which design functions or items would a lot of the country like to see. And sports, women, animals was a very popular one. Flowers was very popular. But the redesign of our and celebrating the 250th year by redesigning all the nation's coin was very popular.
Yeah, you had mentioned Tommy Ram earlier, and I think it's pretty cool that I think it got passed. He's going to have a coin for the service dogs, which he was close to his heart. So I think that's going to be a really, I mean, people love their dogs, so that should be a really popular coin.
No, Tom did a good job in trying to get that passed. That'll be a very popular coin.
Yeah, people love it. With the youth sports and that, and I think like on the pennies and the nickels, I think they were talking about maybe just putting like a dual date. I'm not sure about the redesign, but I think the other ones I saw some potential designs. So I know some of the Europeans, when we saw you in Berlin there, a lot of the Europeans were wondering, what the U.S. was doing, and they pulled up, some of the research and seeing that, and some of the designs are really, really exciting. It'll be fun to see them.
Yeah, no, I would hope the Mint takes advantage of it because it really would give them the opportunity to really, and I know it's a lot of work from the designing and fabrication, all the dies and so on and so forth, but it would be very interesting to see some of the designs. The new design for the famous American Women's Quarter, we put a new design of George Washington with the flowing ponytail in the back, which was originally done, I believe, was being under the original quarter design back in the day.
Fraser Gardner did that.
Correct.
I think it's a beautiful obverse, actually. I think it's a huge upgrade.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I had debates with April Stafford, who runs the design operation for the U.S. Mint, on having a new artist, back to your original point, Jeff, having brand new artist create a design to create a new artist in the 21st century. Guidance, and I went with their choice.
Politics. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Must be politics. I can't wait to see. And Whitman, we're dying to get some guidance from the U.S. Mint about those new designs, because we're already into the 2026 production year for covering things and albums, and so it would really be great to have an idea so we can present that to collectors and really do our best to help the hobby at the same time. So this is all, it's instrumental. This is part of the ecosystem, working with collectors and dealers and mint directors and things like that to iterate and advance our hobby, which something that Jeff and I learned, and Dave, we saw you in Berlin at this incredible coin show in Berlin, that there's a lot of competition with world mints in terms of who's making beautiful coinage and things like that. But there's still the dominant player in the world market is the American coin collector, right? That's the American Mint, United States Mint, and the American coin collector reign supreme.
It is the American coin collector, and the American market is so much larger than all of these other foreign mints. And when I left the mint, I didn't get out of the minting business, but I do still talk to all the mint directors globally. And I can tell you some of the things that the global mints are doing is just short of spectacular. Some of the art, the design on some of these products, the ability to, the Royal Dutch Mint is a very close friend of mine. And Bert is one of the most creative guys in this industry and comes up with some really fascinating designs. And they're very popular. The Germans, the Polish Mint some of the stuff coming out of the Polish Mint is just spectacular. There's a lot of international product that a lot of collectors in the United States are very attracted to.
It's funny, Dave, when I go to the coin show in America, like everyone sets up their old vintage coins and are kind of like, everybody's got their tables. You go to Berlin and it seems like the Europeans really like modern coins even more than like American collectors. There'll be a line, there'll be 100, 200 people in line to buy some new release of a coin I'd never even heard of. So it is funny how it's like their appetite for modern issues. They seem to have a different appreciation of modern, at least at conventions in there versus America. So it's, I think all that stuff does have a lot of room for growth. And I think the more people learn about it, and maybe through books and articles and things like that we're doing with these podcasts, it's, be interesting to see how the demand changes.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in trying to attract younger collectors to our industry and get them involved. And the way you do that is a lot of the kids can't afford a Flooring Hair Liberty. They can't afford a Double Eagle. They can't afford a lot of the stuff that some of older collectors now have the ability to do. But in order to solve that problem, you have to create some new things for the younger generation and the kids in grade school and junior high school and so on and so forth, that their parents are coin collectors, that their parents can direct them and say, there's a new penny out, go out and start searching for your new penny or your new quarter, or your quarter, for example, that we did, which was the Great American Coin Hunt, I think it was called. It's important to continue with both.
Yeah, it's funny you were talking about that. I was thinking about myself about how important when I was president of A&A, and I remember like people ask, well, why you do this, and all the trying to educate and education for young people is, I think it's planting numismatic seeds, because if someone just collects even for a couple 3 years, they will remember that planting the seeds is really important.
I think it's one of the most important things, and that's all the different programs, whether they were.
Yeah, and I hate to do a shameless plug, but I still give out Whitman folders to people for kids and stuff. And whether it's state quarters or Lincoln pennies, it's still an addictive behavior. And you can do all you want swiping on your stuff, but it is fun to fill an album. I still give them out like Johnny Appleseed. I think they're a great product, and the magic still works.
I think I saw John holding up a little while.
There it is.
They still work, man. Give them out. If you're out there listening,
it all starts right here.
So all you young coin collectors, call up Mr. Whitman and order one of those coin collecting penny books.
That's right.
There you go. There you go. There's a plug. Absolutely. I was thinking what I was chuckling about was that coin collectors are like cicadas. You start them and you foster them until about the age of 16, and then they go underground for 17 years, and they come back at the age of 40, let's say, when they finally you're done chasing your kids and bringing them to soccer games all weekend, and you think, I'm bored now. And that happened to me for collecting, and I was also a stamp collector. It just happened. I finally had time to breathe again in my life, and I got back to my childhood hobbies. I think the one other thing I wanted to add to your conversation was licensing. We haven't seen that yet at the United States Mint, although I think I read some press releases about maybe some Marvel or something. The Berlin show feels like Comic-Con in some ways, like a Comic-Con for coins. There's nobody getting dressed up yet, but those companies, those mints around the world are doing a lot of licensing deals. I was talking with the CEO, I think, of Samler Huset, who's a Finnish company that does a lot of marketing. And I said, how come you don't really market in the coin hobby? And he said, because we are the number one licensor of Elvis material and the British Premier Soccer League. And we're marketing to those people. We're marketing to the people who love soccer and the people who love Elvis. We're not going to coin collectors for that. And in that sense, they're making collectors, we hope. That's a role, that functionary role that companies do when they market some of these licensed products. And I hope we can see some of that kind of growth in the United States Mint. I don't know the restrictions. I'm sure there's many. We know that, right?
I'm sure they didn't get the use of all those action heroes for free. My guess would be is there's a licensing fee there. The only problem that I see with someone the size of the U.S. Mint in licensing, the products are already very expensive, and throwing a licensing fee on top of that just increases the cost. But you have to consider the new eyes and the new collectors that would want to collect something like that. So there's pros and cons on both sides of the coin, if you will.
All the more reason for the $5 coin, right? Put the Marvel figures or the licensed figures on these expensive coins. They become, collectible, in their own right, and maybe they can afford to throw 50 cents a licensing fee per unit, or so. I don't know what those things are either, but some kind of unit fee. You can't afford that on the penny, clearly, but there's ways to do it. I think it's really exciting, and hopefully brings attention to our hobby, because there's so many bright people doing very interesting things with numismatics. You could even package, if you had such a thing with let's say NBA sports teams, for example, then you could have cards and coins and everything. This is the way we can advance our hobby.
Yeah, no question about it. Joe Mena, who is the current chief engraver for the Mint, is his background is in creating those action figures and so on and so forth. And my guess is Joe, knowing Joe the way I know him, that he's probably created quite an assortment of very interesting designs that are going to go on these new coins. I'm not sure when they're going to be introduced, but my guess is Joe is going to have some very spectacular designs for the young collectors to get involved with.
I agree. That would sell extra red books, I too. I think that's the kind of dynamism we need in this market. And I think if there's a message there, you just can't keep issuing, even if we keep the penny, it's the same penny on the obverse since 1909. Let's change that thing. Let's do something radical to make it interesting, even on a regular basis. Let's help energize this hobby and give us all something to talk about.
In my opinion. But what it
Yeah.
does is it keeps the penny alive. It keeps an opportunity for something new for the mint to sell to coin collectors. And it's my hope that they don't just eliminate the thing. It's got to be discussed. It's got to be, all the options have to be on the table and thoroughly discussed before you decide on which direction you're going to go.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, I don't even know how this works. It was like thrown out there to like eliminate the cent. What is the next? Everyone weighing in on it. Is there actual practical things going to happen?
When I was the Mint director the last time, we had done attrition studies. There's a pretty good idea of how many pennies are out there in this country. We had a number of discussions in the case that all of a sudden the penny was eliminated. There was a number of efforts to go, which direction would we go, and so on and so forth. If I'm a betting person, the people at the United States Mint probably have a pretty good idea of what needs to happen and get the conversation going, because it's an important conversation. And saving the amount of money the U.S. Mint could save creates problems on one hand, but it solves problems on the other hand. So having that discussion with those that need to have that discussion, I think, is very important. But the Mint, they have a lot of very bright people there that know quite a bit about this industry. It's not going to take them long to figure this one out. The lobby, on the other hand, they have a financial interest in the products that they produce and the products that they sell to the United States Mint. They have to be included in this discussion.
It'll be interesting to see what the next chapters are. It'll be fun to see of it. And I think it's a net positive for the hobby, regardless of what happens, because it's already a positive because everyone's talking about the penny or cent. So it's already a positive.
It feels like a bit like it's a symbolic gesture. It's embarrassing to me that the United States makes 1 billion pennies a year or whatever number. It's just embarrassing. It makes no sense. Why not make 1/10 of a penny? Both of them have the same value to the economy in terms of usefulness. So therefore, it just seems we're not moving along as a society if we're still making pennies. I always define, I want to be able to buy a cup of coffee with a coin. I think we lost that. We probably crossed that Rubicon in 1987, but that should be the definition. We should be able to buy a cup of coffee with this thing, not pull out bills and things like that. I don't know. It'll be interesting to.
One of the things, John, is the Federal Reserve always orders brand new pennies. The old pennies, which there are hundreds of billions of pennies out there, never get back into recirculation. So one of the efforts I tried to do when I was there the last time was to have that discussion. How can we get the pennies to recirculate? It's easy for the Fed to order 3 or 4 billion brand new pennies, but dealing with the cost and the weight and the transportation cost of moving pennies from all the central banks to all the banks that disperse pennies, it's a huge cost. So it's been a system that's been unchanged for years, and that has to change.
We'll see what happens. That's it. I think we can sum it up with that. Listen, I think it's great. It's a great conversation, and I think it's wonderful that you joined us today. And we appreciate your insight. I think this is going to be really, wonderful for the listeners, because I learned so much today listening to you, and there's a lot of these nuances that people naively will just say, get rid of the penny, but not realize how difficult it is. to do it. I think you're right. Let's just stop making them, see how that goes, and let the, why clean your water bottle if there's always a new water bottle, right? It's the same concept. So David, thank you for joining us today. It's really been fascinating. And I know Jeff, and I speak for Jeff, and when I say we would love to have you back 100 times. So we'll appreciate it. And we also, before I forget, want to thank you for endorsing the 2026 Red Book. And since this is the Red Book podcast, you're a natural for anchoring the show with us today. Thank you.
Well,
Thanks
guys.
a lot, Dave.
I hope I'm not going to get in too much trouble with all my over-opinionated thoughts. So you never know.
No, next time we're going to do it with whiskey.
That'd be great. That's good.
All right, guys.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right.
Thanks very much.